So if we're going to change anything, I hope we channel our fervor and angst at those who are to be held to the most account than those who are in our own family, right?
Not right. This should have been extremely obvious, but not everyone with the same label as you is on the same team. So Lauren Bosch made a video criticizing, well, criticism. Specifically, she goes on to talk about how the left is really notorious for infighting and claims this halts progress that the left as a whole has shared interest in. She was quite vague in her ramble, so it's hard to know what she's referring to specifically. I'm not sure if she was so wound up from her coffee that she omitted details or if she's used to speaking overly generically, but the general sentiment that she was espousing was problematic enough to warrant a response. I mean, conceptually, the idea that holding others accountable, regardless of if they share the same self-identifying label, is already something we should embrace for numerous reasons that I'll get into. So to see her be true to her last name and bash it was frustrating, to say the least. It wasn't until I read the comments that things got very specific, and that's actually what pushed me over the edge to make this response. But let's go in order and save the worst for last.
Like, we would rather demand perfection from someone who's even trying than acknowledge progress.
Perfection is being used as a buzzword here. The connotation it brings to mind is of something trivial like, hey honey, I forgot to put the trash bin out last night, but don't be mad, you know I'm not perfect, or I left the light on in the bathroom again, but hey, nobody's perfect. However, when people use this term, which brings to mind that level of triviality, and then plug it into something contextually important, that's where we start having issues. Now, I can think of plenty of specific instances where people saying someone ought to be held accountable is actually entirely reasonable. And it's not hard to prove this distinction to be meaningful, but it seems as though without a phrase to retaliate against this sophistry, people are left either being confused or those who do see problems with it aren't able to easily articulate how to call this mystical sense of holding moral agents responsible for what is many times a very important matter. I'm going to offer that today. It's called logical consistency, and guess what? I can prove that you already agree with this idea in many contexts. Do you guys remember in history class when we learned in the 1850s, tensions started to rise between the North and South of the United States because it wasn't just the North that was divided with the South, it was the North divided with its own so-called members who insisted that refusing compromise on black rights would tear our nation apart. And while some were clearly pro-abolition and brave enough to maintain integrity for black rights, others were scared of the backlash and proposed gradualism in its place. They were all constituted as Northerners, but they were not on the same team. So the formula is very simple. Whenever something is a moral baseline, someone failing to meet said baseline is not failing to be perfect. They're being logically inconsistent. And moral insufficiency, as long as the morals you are calling out ultimately are agreeable, is always unacceptable, and that deserves to be called out. This then means that when you say acknowledge progress, it's false. It's by definition not progress if someone shares a morally distinct difference of a view and attempts to perpetuate said view in place of the other view.
And that prevents so many people from even trying at all.
You have no evidence on this, so why are you making positive claims, Lauren? Do you think your anecdotes should be persuasive? What does it look like to not even try it at all? Let's use your coffee example with the plastic top. If the coffee company said exactly what you said just now when you complained, like, you know what, because you gave us crap, we're going to keep wasting more plastic. Do you know whose fault that would be? The companies. Like, this happens all the time within veganism. People say, you're too harsh. I'm not going to listen if you keep talking that way. And to which I would ask, would you say the same thing if I was advocating for basic black rights or women's rights, like the right to life and autonomy? It's pretty clear that it's a category error of any situation where someone ignores the importance of a message willfully because the tone was harsh. They're the problem.
And trust me, I hear it from some of you all the time in my comment section, in my DMs, telling me to do better or that I'm not doing enough. And I want to remind you, we are on the same team.
Again, it's unclear what exactly these people are calling you out on, but it's clear that this is not a true statement, as your moral view may be sufficiently distinct enough for someone to reject regardless of you both vaguely identifying as part of the left.
So if we're going to change anything, I hope we channel our fervor and angst at those who are to be held to the most account than those who are in our own family, right?
You say the most account, and this is a really bad position. The idea that something is not worthy enough of a cause to raise awareness on because you can imagine there being something worse is silly for a few reasons. First of all, you don't have evidence that whenever someone is called out on a given issue, that it's not as productive as your idea that you can imagine. That's a positive claim. You have the burden of proof for it, and I know you imagine that an echo chamber can replace that, but that only creates an illusion at best. Second, you're just shifting the goalpost. Even if we granted that there were situations someone could be spending their time on something which is worse than what we're currently attacking, that says nothing about if what they're attacking is sufficiently important enough to do so on. Stop belittling accountability because you can endlessly imagine better causes to fight for, like, hey guys, I know you were going to stop this woman from being attacked on the streets, but why go after a criminal? Why not go after gangs that are doing it widespread? Hey, I know you guys are attacking gangs for taking advantage of multiple women, but why not go after an army that's doing it? Like, it's just insanely dumb to not address if something is worthy of attention individualistically, merely because there's always a worse idea out there to attack. Her top commenter says, yes, like vegan who become very angry at vegetarians for not going far enough, even though vegetarianism is often the first step to veganism. Channel your anger at the meat eaters and simply encourage the others to take the next step. Vegetarianism still allows for murder, rape, kidnapping, and tons of other violations. The idea that it's morally acceptable to violate the rights of some in order to save many more justifies organ harvesting. It's obviously a false dichotomy because you can just reject rights violations as a whole, but the question was never if allowing for it could eventually lead someone to be vegan. It might. But if you wouldn't accept someone violating human rights in the name of one day not violating them anymore, what's the trait in the animal context that makes it morally acceptable? As for the channel all your anger to the meat eaters and simply encourage the others to take the next step, it's not even clear that vegetarianism causes less suffering in rights violations, but provided it did, to some degree, no. There's another option, and it's called rejecting any rights violations. If you need an intuition pump, ask yourself if you'd allow people violating black rights to simply be encouraged to take the next step, or if you would denounce it all as being morally insufficient because it's logically inconsistent. Lauren, of course, comes in to remove her accountability even further, as she's been trying to do all video long, with, yes, or even less shame/anger at meat eaters and more energy towards the animal agriculture industry and policies to hold them accountable. If you choose to kill and rape innocent animals, you deserve to be shamed. Anger is justified, and attempting to remove your responsibility to shift the focus on the industry as a whole, especially to imply it's just the welfare practices that matter rather than the rights violations inherently, is one of the most disgusting things you can do. You would never say this in regards to black or women's rights, and to answer your question here, has shaming anyone ever inspired real, lasting action? It's the only thing that does. Having a conscience is the only hope for change. I'm going to read Frederick Douglass's 1852 speech after the 4th of July because it couldn't be more fitting and I couldn't have said it better myself. For it is not the light that is needed, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be roused. The propriety of the nation must be startled. The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed. And its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days in the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty an unholy license, your national greatness swelling vanity, your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless, your denunciations of tyrants, brass-fronted impudence, your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery, your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity are to him more bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy, a thin-veiled cover-up crimes, which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on the earth guilty for practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States at this very hour. The Civil War, thankfully, was won by those who believed that slave justifiers were guilty. It doesn't always mean someone is able to be convinced, nor that they're worth convincing, but I'll tell you right now, the slaves back then would have never gained liberty because your attitude was the prevailing one. One of moral compromise and an avoidance of shame in place of accountability. And just as I will say to vegans who stand in my way as I go on to liberate animals with logical consistency, those who stop to celebrate the rights violations caused by these baby steps in evil so normalized, this 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice. I must mourn.